everything. And so we were without power for about 3 days and without internet for close to a week. And we're just 4 blocks away here. So here we've got Valley. So we loaded all our frozen things and some coolers and brought it down here, and Sheila made room for things. And so we put our freezer things in there, and Karen did as well. And then we also didn't have any internet. So we made frequent trips down to church to recharge our phones and to talk on the phone and catch up on what was going around in the world. So anyway, I had listened to a presentation from Bob on resiliency hubs, and I thought, hey, Ray and I and Karen are all using it. And I think this is something that Valley should know more about. Sheila was interested in it as well. So this is Reverend Buff Grace from MNIPL, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. And they're working with churches about this concept. So I hope it's something that we can think about doing at Valley. So it's just an introduction to this topic. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Carolyn. Thanks, Valley, for inviting us to come and speak. Your congregation has a great relationship with us. You've been so supportive. We really appreciate your support. If you are not already on our emailing list and you'd like to get more information from us, you can add your name to this. I forgot my clipboard, so I'm going to send a little book around so you can bear down on that. I'll just pass this around while I talk. Our organization helped your congregation install a solar system on your roof, and we work with congregations to do that kind of thing, or to do educational opportunities, or all kinds of efforts like that. We work with reparations work with Indigenous folks. We do advocacy work at the legislature. Anything where faith and climate change intersect. And I'm going to talk about why we've kind of moved into this arena of resilience. But first, I want to ask you, when you think of the word resilience, the concept, what comes to mind? What do you think of as resilient? What is that?
Bouncing back.
Bouncing back. Bouncing back from really anything, any disruption to the system. Yeah.
Take value but not break.
Bend but not break. Can you think of a time that you personally have dealt with being resilient? Anybody?
I guess when we found out our son was deaf, we had to really rise to this brand new challenge. I'd never met a deaf person before in my whole life. Here was my kid.
It's your child, right? That must have been a demanding time to adjust to that. And is it equally demanding now as when you first learned?
Oh, no, we were resilient. We
were resilient.
learned how to deal with it.
Right, you developed means to respond and you probably learned some things from your son and from your family adjusting to that maybe other families don't know. Right, and you have capabilities, capacities that right, you know another language, right? Right, so resilience can be bouncing back to exactly what was before, but it can also mean bouncing forward into some new capability and opportunity that we couldn't have expected. From a methodological and kind of scientific point of view, systems from an oyster to a complex corporation to a community to all kinds of complicated systems respond to threats or challenges or damage or whatnot in ways that either grow and improve and get better, or at least stabilize back to neutral and occasionally never get back to kind of that thriving point that they were, right? So when we talk about resilience, we're talking about kind of that whole concept. And we have some specific topics and kind of venue that we want to put that into, but we're not losing that larger context of just resilience as a concept. So as I mentioned, our organization has worked with faith communities all over Minnesota, about 400 different faith communities, Jewish, Baha'i, Buddhist, Christian, of all different denominations. And you may have experienced some of our work, the solar system, other educational opportunities. You've been gracious to invite us to participate in your worship, that kind of thing. We work on practical, systemic, relational. And our work mainly has been about how can we reduce carbon emissions? Because we know carbon emissions lead to climate change. And so the world, the Earth as a planetary system is under threat from the rising greenhouse gases, which increase the temperature, which has caused all kinds of havoc across our world, right? But more and more, we've realized, okay, we can't just mitigate this problem. We can't just work on carbon reduction. That misses the point that we're already dealing with the consequences of carbon emissions. We're already seeing damage. We're seeing more intense storms. We're seeing extremely costly problems in the billions of dollars to homeowners, all the way up to cities and states in damage, insurance companies and whatnot. So we've also got to adapt. And that's the effort that we've kind of moved into with this concept of resilience hubs. So here are some of I asked you to come up with the consequences of climate change. These are some of the ones you would probably think. Are there any others on here that you think might not be listed there? Maybe secondary consequences of these, so like damage or reduction in our food systems, problems with our electrical grid and our power systems. So we've got these major consequences that come directly from a warming Earth, but then we've got secondary consequences that come from these problems. Yes.
Well, it's nothing really about wildlife and changes zones where wildlife lives. That's critical too.
Right, good point. Yeah, the whole natural systems that we depend on that run that we kind of enjoy for millennia are under threat in a lot of ways, or facing their own demands that they can't adapt to quickly enough. A good point. So when these things happen in a community, as Carolyn, you gave a great introduction. We faced as a community across the Twin Cities this problem of this storm and the consequences that had happened. And you turned, in your case, to your church. So here's a working definition that we're using: the ability of the system to absorb disturbance and still retain its basic function, structure, and feedback, or grow into a structure and feedbacks that work in the new context. So when we talk about a resilience hub, it's very important that we aren't thinking only of a building. It's very easy because it's tactile and three-dimensional, and we can hold it, we can see it, we can imagine it in our minds, and we can go there, we can get the things we need from there maybe. And so a lot of people, when they think of resilience hubs, they think, okay, a solar system with a battery backup and freezer space and refrigeration space and a communication network, place that charge my cell phone, a place to shelter, a place to get food. All those things are vastly important. But if you don't have the social network of trusted relationships, people won't show up there, or they won't know that it exists, or you won't have the team to put in place and make operational the things that, you know, are available in that physical structure. So it's very important. This is a more important, at least in order of operations, it's more important to get your trusted community before you get your physical location, so to speak. Here are some basic concepts of what a resilience hub might provide in the midst of a weather disruption. You know, and we are working with faith communities to discern what is our building and our social community fit for? What are we best able to provide in the midst of a weather disruption? And let's identify and strengthen and operationalize the low-hanging fruit first. So, you know, some communities already have a food shelter in their building. They're a great candidate for being a source of food in the case of an emergency. But other congregations, they don't have that, they haven't done that, so don't spend time working on that right now. Identify some other things that might be valuable and lean into that you might already have capacity for. Does that make sense? Here are some of the folks that we're partnering with. We're working with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. They're a national organization that has been doing some work on resilience hubs for about 8 years. And they've developed a curriculum and a set of standards and some practices, and they've got some locations around the country, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, and Tempe, Arizona in particular. And we've adopted some of the things that they've developed. We haven't kind of taken everything that they do whole hog, but they've been probably the biggest, most developed partner in this so far. We're also working with Resilience Hub Collaborative. There's a kind of a really smart systems thinker that started the work at USDN and then went out and created her own Resilience Hub Collaborative. And then we've worked with the Humphrey School for Public Affairs, and we're working with the Climate Adaptation Partnership at the University of Minnesota. We're doing some pilots with Ramsey County. They have some staff who are dedicated to climate and health, and they work on health impacts of climate specifically. And so that's like some staff, and we're learning from their emergency response staff about how best to help congregations integrate with the emergency resources in their area. So you can imagine there's people who are first responders and others who develop search and rescue and emergency response and work with Red Cross and FEMA and others around big emergency catastrophes. And they have a certain way of thinking, and they have really good strategic systems that they've been using for decades to respond to emergencies. We are learning how they think. And so that our congregations who work with us, don't have to go do all that work on their own. And we can speak the same language and use the same vocabulary. So they'll trust us more that, oh yeah, these folks know what they're doing, they understand us, and they can integrate with the things that we're doing. Another one of our interfaith powered lights down in Georgia is also working on this concept in a similar way to us. They're working on these, especially out on the coast of Georgia that sees more hurricanes. And then we are learning from this group Together New Orleans, which is interested in building a resilience hub within 15 minutes walking distance of every resident of New Orleans. So we're kind of watching what they're doing and learning from them and how they're doing. So no one partner that we're working with kind of has the silver bullet, but this is somewhat of a new concept, especially within faith communities, and we're kind of looking at how we can build that together. There's a few kind of template structures that help us conceive of resilience hubs that have proven really effective so far. One of those is just thinking, this is not rocket science here, or you can probably come up with this on your own, but there's normal every day, there's during the disruption, and then there's recovery. And that's the resilience hub will operate in slightly different ways in each of those different modes. They're gonna go into action during a disruption, and then there may be certain things that they can provide during a recovery period as folks get back to normal or back to the new normal that faith community can continue to provide. But normal every day is easily to overlook. You know, we're thinking about, well, we're building these 4 weather disruptions, so they're not really going to be active until the storm hits or the heat wave hits or the drought hits or whatever it is. But actually, normal every day, you are already acting in ways that are probably supportive of resilience now. I mean, you are creating every Sunday and sometimes multiple times of the week, a place where people feel heard, welcomed, and trusted. They have good relationships with one another. They learn from one another. They share some of their, you know, the things that are close to them. You pray together. You sing together. I mean, those are things that build a strong community of people that care for one another and will show up for one another in times of trouble, right? So you're already doing some of the things. There may be certain programs you have. You've already installed a solar system. You could easily consider a battery backup. You know, maybe that's in your future for providing a place that continues to provide electricity when if the power grid goes down. There's all kinds of things that happen in this normal every day. There may be ways that you can reach out even more to your neighborhood. So people who maybe aren't going to come worship with you, but you'd like them to know, hey, you're working on these topics, and you'd like them to know we're tooling up so that we can be a source of help in times of crisis. And here are the things that we are going to provide. And maybe here are the things we're not going to provide because we know those are provided in some other part of our area. The other thing that, the other kind of rubric or template that we've used that has proven effective is these different pillars of the resilience of. So services and programs, you can imagine we've already talked about some of those services and programs that you all are already producing or might produce. Your buildings and your landscapes, how can those be effective? You've got community gardens out there, that's part of you've got a playground, you've got a lot of capacity here. You've got a great facility in many ways that people can come and feel welcome and sheltered. And then the operations. This is a part where you've got some operational capacity probably already as a faith community. You have staff who do certain tasks and you know what those are and they're regularly done every week or every month. But you also have to begin to think, okay, how might we operationalize X program or X service that might be different in times of disruption than it is in regular times? And then communications are critical. How do we communicate when the grid goes down or when certain disruptions happen? How do we get the word to people? What information needs to be communicated or what information is less important? And who needs to hear from whom? You know, what kinds of communication needs to happen? And then kind of going with buildings and landscapes. How are we powered? What structures do we need to power various things in our facilities? You know, in that storm that you talked about, Carolyn, we had visitors, overnight guests staying in our house. And fortunately, they were friends of ours who we like to go camping with. And so the power was out and they were actually on a camping trip. They were stopping by to get a shower and enjoying a little under the roof time instead of out in the tent. And they hauled their camping equipment in and we, you know, set up our little stove to make coffee in the morning and we had candles during the night and we had flashlights and everything. So, you know, what kind of power you use can be a variety of things. I remember when Hurricane Helene hit Asheville, one of the things that came out of that, people noticed that, oh, all the backpacking stores, you know, handed out water filters to everybody. And they were gone in, you know, a matter of a day. Everybody got the water filters. That's a form of power. It's just human power. to pump those water filters, but it meant people could drink water. They had safe drinking water. You know, that was a big thing. So power doesn't necessarily mean electricity or even natural gas. It can be all kinds of different forms, batteries and human power, and lights, and candles and flames, and you know, their power comes from a lot of different places. So just a couple more slides here, and then I want to open it up for discussion. One of the things that's really critical, and the folks that we're working with most directly, we want folks to have communications with their local geography. So we can't build these resilience hubs just with a small team making a bunch of decisions in their facility. We need the engagement of the community for two reasons. One, we learn things from our local community about what they perceive as potential problems during disruptions that we may not think of. And we learn about who they are, and they feel heard and more connected to our hub so that they build those trusted relationships. Anytime you ask someone, well, what do you think? Or how do you see this? You know, that builds a bit of trust because you're inviting that person to engage with you and collaborate. So we're trying to help faith communities build community gatherings in which we can discuss these concepts and invite people to share what they see. We have a big vision of 10,000 resilience hubs across the state. We're talking about local mom and pop corner stores. We're not talking about building giant supermarkets. There's a place for giant supermarkets, and we see maybe state, local government coming in to build, you know, big central system places that can provide certain responses. But what we're talking about is helping our faith communities identify 1, 2, maybe 3 services that they know, or programs that they know they can provide. They don't have to provide everything. They can provide 1 or 2 things in those weather disruptions. And lastly, these are the things that we've been doing towards this vision so far. We've been holding these webinars, Carolyn mentioned, and I think Janet going to one of these webinars that we've had starting in January. You can view these videos on our YouTube channel from recordings of past webinars, and we're doing more this fall. We've got one coming out next Tuesday, or no, this Tuesday, the 16th. We have developed a community of practice, so we've got 10 sites, congregations like yours, who are coming together. We just started this at the beginning of September. Over the course of the summer, we were identifying who those 10 would be, and now we've launched this. And these are 10 sites that are going to try putting this in place, and they're going to experiment with this, and we're going to learn from one another about how it works and what challenges do we face. And this is a 9-month or 8-month process, and by April, we expect to have kind of a template of here's a process that you can go through as a faith community that will help you become a resilience hub and help you to identify the type of resilience hub you would want to be. And then lastly, we are developing a task force of experts. So we built relationships with our state Green Bank, with CDFI's community development financial institutions. These are local financial institutions that are trying to bolster community investment. Like I said, Ramsey County emergency staff and other health professionals, just trying to collect people whose job it is to help build these types of resilience, so that when we run into obstacles, we can turn to these experts and say, oh, you have theories about this. Here's a practical problem. Help us get it over this hurdle. And we bring their expertise and professionalism to that problem. We've held some listening sessions around the state about some of these concepts, and particularly around insurance issues. I can get more into that if you're interested. But we're seeing a lot of problems with insurance in other parts of the country, and we're starting to see those in Minnesota. And so we're working with the Department of Commerce to respond to that and start to get that information out. Okay. what kind of questions or thoughts or comments, tell me what you think about this concept and what you think about your congregation or questions you have about this or whatever.
Speak a little bit more about what you just said about insurance. Is that like the idea of having other people under your roof and the things that happen while we're here?
Good question. No, although there might be a situation in which you need to increase your liability insurance or whatnot, if you're gonna do that. I think there's some already built in, but you know, this is more about homeowners and business owners and to some extent congregations facing rising insurance costs because of the rise in weather disruptions. Yeah, did you have a comment about that?
As an example, just a couple of years ago, we were informed that the company we'd had all of our insurance with for 20+ years wasn't going to insure us anymore.
They just dropped your coverage.
Got this announcement that it was going to end. And so I went to talk to our agent. And they said, yeah, well, this company decided they didn't want to provide homeowners insurance in the western Twin Cities area anymore. They said, well, but they really can't do that because that would be redlining. But what they can do is drop the agent. So this company had dropped our agent as one of their agents. And therefore, if we wanted to keep that insurance, we had to find another agent to get it with. We chose to change companies. Yeah, but that was an example of just where this company just decided that they didn't like us folk out west anymore and snuck around redlining and did what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I have these statistics correct. We've worked with Peter Brickwitty, who's a associate commissioner or assistant commissioner at the Department of Commerce. And he's specifically tasked with looking at insurance, and he's one that we partnered with on these listening sessions. He shows a graph of the last 10 years and the insurance, the insurance business, the industry kind of expects, well, there'll be years that they lose and there'll be years that they make a profit, and it'll balance out. And that's been pretty true. But in Minnesota, over the last 10 years, they've lost pretty big, like $2 billion over the last 10 years. And so they're a lot stricter on monitoring hail damage claims on roofs now than they used to be. When we were out in Morris, talked to a farmer who had replaced the roof on his home. I think it was 5 times in the last 20 years, 4 times in the last 20 years. So out western Minnesota, evidently they get harsher hailstorms. And they had a derecho come through last year that completely wiped out a lot of barns and agricultural buildings. So they also the farmers out there deal with federal crop insurance, which is a whole different market and has its own problems and whatnot. But, down in St. Peter, when we had our listening session down there, people were very cognizant of it. They remember very clearly, even though it's 27 years ago, the tornado that came through there and just devastated the community. But they've seen harder to maintain insurance, or for instance, there's businesses that have lost flood insurance along the Minnesota River there in St. Peter, that nobody will insure their business anymore for floods. And so it's either dropped insurance or insurance rates really going up that have people concerned. If you can't get insurance for your home, it makes it really difficult to sell it. And so that's some of the problems that they're looking at. So the state, as you may know, I didn't really understand this until I talked to Peter, but the state regulates insurance industry in its state. Each state regulates insurance, and they have a board that regulates it.